Adriana here to give you a heads up that a new round of my live online birth prep class series starts March 8th. If you're looking to have a wonderfully flowing birth, knowing how to fully support your physiology, even when things don't go as planned, then this is the class for you. Join me and let's get you birth ready. Classes start March 8th and space is limited, so learn more and sign up at birthfulcourses.com today. Hello, mighty parents and parents-to-be. I'm Adriana Lozada, and you're listening to Birthful. And today, just like every other week, I'm on my own taking about 10 minutes to talk to you one-on-one about a topic that I want to dive deeper into. This week, it's going to be your options of where to give birth. Now, 98% of the births in the U.S. happen in a hospital. And while this is true, many people don't know that they have other options. But because physiological birth flows best when you feel safe, supported, loved, if you don't necessarily feel safe in a hospital, then you might want to explore other options. Now, since the beginning of the pandemic, there has been a higher demand for out-of-hospital births, with many home birth practices booked full months in advance, even as their phones keep ringing off the hook. And the number of planned unassisted home births or free births seems to also be on the increase. And maybe this is because of the also increased fear of hospitals and then maybe not being able to find a home birth midwife or birth center where to give birth. So I'm going to do a quick rundown of how each birth setting differs. And I want to make sure you know I'm not going to talk about safety because that is a very detailed and nuanced conversation for another day. But I will say that the research shows that if you have a low-risk full-term pregnancy, all birth settings carry similar risks. And the decision of what place is right for you is a highly personal one. So let's start with the hospital. About 98% of births happen in the hospitals in the U.S., and it's the most widely available option, although there are significant holes in rural and urban settings that leave many in health deserts with no good options. If you are going to a hospital, it is because hospitals serve people who are low risk and also people who are high risks, and those are about 15% of all the people at hospitals. And also in hospitals, most of the providers are OBs, so about 86% of them, although there are some mixed practices and some full midwifery practices. Hospitals are, of course, the most medicalized option, and it's the one where you're also going to get more interventions and more limits to what you can do, limiting your choices. So you might have to follow protocol and get continuous monitoring and limit what you drink and eat, maybe limit your movement, have lots of cervical checks, lots of peoples, and go through triage, which is this limbo between staying and going, and you can't just cocoon into your birth because you don't know what you're going to do. So that is also an interruption. Also, very few of them allow water births as an option. Hospital births tend to be covered by insurance. And in terms of interventions, you have to then figure out that you are going somewhere. You clearly have to figure out during your labor when to go to the hospital. And usually you can't go home before 24 hours because they want to observe the baby for that long. Today's episode is brought to you by Beekeepers Naturals, creators of clean, science-backed remedies that naturally support your daily health. For example, their Bee Soothe cough syrup tastes nothing like the yucky artificial cherry-tasting cough syrups we grew up with because it contains no drugs, dyes, or refined sugars. Instead, Bee Soothe is made up of powerful immune supporters like pure buckwheat honey, elderberry, chaga mushroom, bee propolis, and olive leaf extract. We love it and take it to ward off itchy throats. Beekeepers Naturals has other amazing products like their bee-powered honey, which is a therapeutic blend of propolis, royal jelly, and bee pollen to support all-day energy and your immune system. Check out Beekeepers Naturals to try Bee Soothe cough syrup before it sells out. Save 15% on your first order today by going to beekeepersnaturals.com/birthful. That's BEEKEEPERSNATURALS.com/birthful to get 15% off. Now, for birth centers, only about 0.4% of births in the U.S. happen in birth centers, even though they've been increasing since 2004. And you can have two types of birth centers. One is a freestanding center or one that is attached to a hospital. But the ones that are attached to a hospital, be careful that what you want is units that are autonomous and run by midwives and not just redecorated OB wings. Usually birth centers only take patients that are healthy, low risk, and that definition can create limits of what can happen in a birth center. So often no twins, no breech, no people with gestational diabetes, no births after 42 weeks, and no VBACs, although that varies from center to center. Birth centers tend to be midwife-led with a nurse, and it does provide for high continuity of family-centered care. You are definitely connected with your provider. There is medical equipment available at the birth center, but you will experience less interventions. And if you are looking to have an epidural at any point, then that would require a transfer to the hospital, although some birth centers may have the option of nitrous oxide, so laughing gas, and in general will focus on non-medicated comfort measures to help you through the process. A transfer to a hospital from a birth center is easier or tends to be easier than a transfer from home because they tend to have policies in place for easy continuity of care. And if you're having a birth center birth, the statistics are that about 16% of them transfer to a hospital. At a birth center birth, you take the lead, you move however you want, eat whatever you want. The monitoring is usually intermittent, and you have access to a water birth. You'll also have more privacy because it's more home-like, but you still have to actually leave your home and go somewhere and figure out when you're going to leave. So that is an intervention. Not all insurances cover birth center births. However, the staff tends to know how to assist you figuring out what coverage and payments you will end up having. And you get to go home quicker, usually around 4 to 6 hours. And then your third option would be a home birth. And in the US, close to 1% of all births happen at home. The options there are an assisted birth, assisted by home birth midwives, or an unassisted birth, also known as a free birth. If you're having a birth assisted by midwives, usually they can only serve populations that are healthy, low risk, and then that also creates a definition of limits. Like I mentioned, no twins, no previous cesareans, no breech. You might find that things vary depending on the midwife and depending on the state. With home birth midwives, you usually get continuous care by a small group, and they do bring tons of medical equipment with them, including oxygen, including Pitocin, if needed. So it's not like they show up with just, their hands in a little bag. And they tend to travel in pairs or have an assistant because one of them will be caring for you and the other one for the baby. If you are at home and want to have access to pain medications like an epidural, then you would have to transfer to a hospital. Of home births, about 37% transfer to a hospital, but many of those are non-emergent. If you've already had a baby, then that transfer rate tends to be 9%. At a home birth, you'll have very few interruptions and complete control of the environment. So you can decide if other kids are around. It's super comfortable because you're already home. So after you've given birth, you're already ready to sleep in your bed and have all your amenities. You don't need to go anywhere. And you can have a water birth if you so desire. The home birth midwives leave a few hours after the baby has been born. And even though you don't have around-the-clock care, they will visit you the day after you give birth and then again a few days later and maybe even more. And finally, home births may not be covered by insurance and the cost does vary by location. Now, obviously, your choices will be limited to whether you're able to afford it if it's not covered by your insurance or if you don't have insurance and what's actually available around you. But given the numbers, one thing is clear. The U.S. needs more out-of-hospital birth options. With the current health deserts in rural and urban settings, an interconnected web of home birth midwives, birth centers, and hospitals all working together and providing continuity of care in response to the individual pregnant person's health needs would be an amazingly wonderful solution and one that other countries have shown works really well. To take a step towards increasing birthplace options today, and especially if you're in Rochester, New York, I encourage you to follow on Instagram at Radiant Birth Center and consider donating to make it a reality. You can connect with Birthful on Instagram at Birthful Podcast, and to learn more about Birthful and my birth and postpartum preparation classes, go to birthful.com. Birthful was created by me, Adriana Lozada, and is a production of Lantigua Williams & Co. The show's senior producer is Paulina Velasco. Jen Chien is executive director. Cedric Wilson is our lead producer. Kojin Tashiro mixed this episode. Thank you for listening to and sharing Birthful. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and everywhere you listen. Come back next week for more ways to inform your intuition. Mighty Ones, we want to know more about you, so we've created a survey. Go to birthful.com/survey, and as a bonus for filling it out, you'll be automatically entered to win a $100 Amex gift card. Tell us what you think at birthful.com/survey.